Mr. Lee, Sir Edward, thank you very much for calling me, and always a pleasure to have you in charge, making sure we behave ourselves during the course of today. And can I join in the chorus of plaudits for both my honourable friend from Amber Valley, but also the honourable lady from Newcastle on Tyne, who, as co-chairs of the APPG, have done so much to raise this, and in particular my honourable friend from Amber Valley, who organised this debate for us today. We've actually had a series of extremely carefully considered and very wide-ranging speeches, not just from former chairs of the Public Accounts Committee, as you are, of course, yourself, Sir Edward, but also from members of the DCMS Select Committee and many others too. And it just shows the breadth of concern and the breadth of issues into which the tentacles of corruption can spread. Everything from sport through potentially to international aid, certainly through to public contracts and property ownership in Baker Street, amongst other places in this country too. And the point which I think is important for us, I think there is cross-party agreement on this, but the point which is important for us all to remember is that while I was pleased and I welcome the notion that everybody has says that the Prime Minister and others have been instrumental in taking forward this agenda, there is a great deal more to do. The effects of corruption are not just felt in other countries. I think the honourable friend from Amber Valley was quite right to say we may be blessedly free of some of the more commonplace and in-your-face petty forms of corruption from people demanding bribes for everyday public services. But that does not mean to say that any society, ours included, is safe. And the effects are very widespread, very pernicious. Corruption raises the costs of doing business through bribe-taking and creating friction costs for anybody wanting to do business. That's not just true in the UK, but it will also be true for our exporters trying to get contracts and win jobs for our workers in exporting overseas. It also means that consumers have to put up with less good quality goods, because if goods are purchased through a corrupt process, the chances are that they will be second best either in quality or in value for money. And again, everybody suffers. It drives up prices, not just in the UK, and we've heard examples of property prices in the UK, but around the world as well. And most fundamentally, but most importantly of all, it is a fundamentally unjust way to run not just a country, but the world society in general. It means that people cannot be sure that what they see on their TV screens, what they hear from their leaders, or indeed what they hear from their bosses, is indeed correct or fair. It's a piece of social justice that we're talking about here, and therefore there is a huge amount, I think, to do. Now, I will try, in the very limited amount of time, to try and respond to some of the particular points which have been raised. I want to leave a couple of moments, if I can, for my honourable friend from Amber Valley, just to sum up. But he asked specifically what will be on the agenda of the summit and precisely who will be coming. I can give him some guidance on that, but obviously these things are still underway, so I can't give him a running commentary. He quite rightly pointed out that the overall aims of the summit are to expose corruption, to punish those who perpetrate it, and to drive out the culture of corruption. We've had a number of, I will take them as submissions, I think, from all round, for the ways in which, for example, asset recovery can be improved. I think the Right Honourable Lady from Barking suggested confiscation, but there are other suggestions for other kinds of asset recovery, for example, as well. There are suggestions for better opportunities for whistleblowing and better governance in sport, which has in the past potentially been one of the channels for distributing ill-gotten gains around the world. All of these things need to be discussed and will be, I'm sure, on the agenda, but the precise details of the agenda and will be released nearer the time. I can also, though, give my honourable friend a little bit of detail about who is being invited to this. Now, clearly the final guest list will be, again, released nearer the time, but just to confirm that we've invited both the G20 countries, leading international organisations in the field, including, obviously, the UN, the World Bank, the OECD and the IMF, and a wide range of other countries, which I think is where he was going. We will have more details of those, I'm sure, as we get closer to the day, which are leading the fight against global corruption or have a pivotal role to play. And I understand as well that John Kerry from the US will be here as well. I should also mention, Mr. Lee, that there will be an event the day before, which will be on a broader invitation list, which will be run, for example, by the Business Innovation and Skills Department as well, which will invite a number of companies and other NGOs on a broader invitation list. And that, I think, is because there are a large number of not just NGOs, but also companies who understand, and sectoral organisations, who understand the reputational damage which corruption can cause. And we need to harness those who are willing to take a lead on this and to try and set the right tone and to take part in those three aims I spoke of, particularly the one about driving out corruption, because their cooperation and help will be essential in setting a tone for others to follow, not just, therefore, in political leadership, but also in commercial and potentially in third sector leadership as well. So I hope I've given him some extra detail. More will be coming, I'm sure, and I'm sure he will want to hear more about that. The Right Honourable Lady from Barking also asked about whether or not we would be willing to use last resort powers. I think I will sort of summarise them as. Clearly, Sir Edward, those are last resort. We don't want to have to use them. We want to make sure that people come as far as we possibly can without any need for that. But I think it is clear from all the submissions, all the suggestions, all the speeches that we've heard this morning, that there is a huge thirst and a huge desire to see this agenda taken further. We are not unique in this country in wanting to do that. We have taken some important leading steps, but we are far from the only people who need to be involved in this and far from the only people who are involved in this. This needs to be something which is taken forward on an international scale. The UK absolutely needs to play its part, and we've heard the reasons why, particularly given our overseas territories, independent territories, as well as the UK itself, why we need to be a leading member of that international coalition, if I can put it that way. But it is something which is clearly a developing agenda. The proposals and the progress which has been made in the wake of the FIFA scandal, for example, shows how much further international opinion has moved and still needs to move. The revelations in the wake of the Panama Papers show how much further we can go and how much further public opinion has moved, but still needs to move again. I am sure, Sir Edward, that this is a topic which is going to continue to develop, and that the rules, the regulations, but also, most importantly of all, the ethos and the culture of international business and international investment and international ownership will continue to change and continue to tighten. And I'm sure that is something which, on a cross-party basis, everybody in this room and more broadly will welcome with open arms. I will leave a few seconds, if I can, for my honourable friends to respond.
Can I just thank everyone who took part in this debate for the excellent speeches we had. I think it's very clear to anyone who's watched this debate that there is a strong consensus across the House from all the parties that were here that we want the summit to be a success next week. We want there to be some very real, strong action taken, some very real agreements that take this issue forward, and ways of making sure those things happen on a timely basis, so we don't just drift along and forget about this in a few years. So I wish the Minister and the Government well with that summit, and we look forward to seeing what the actions are next week.
Order. Order.